Hey guys, this is Nick Christopher from Mob Tales. Thanks for tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe. We definitely would appreciate that. Today we have a very special guest, um, Larry Rolla, who has a very interesting history behind him that we're going to share about today. Larry, thanks a lot for coming on the show. We definitely appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Well, I did a little bit of background check to learn a little more about you. I've heard your name before with other people, but I never really got to know you. And I'm going to just give the audience a little bit of a background just so they understand. Um, Larry comes from the Queens area, Jackson Heights, which we just discovered, and he was involved with um, horse racing, that kind of thing that he was always interested in when he was young. And then he got involved, he kind of got mixed up with a couple of guys from the life and that he will tell us about eventually. And it's a very interesting twist and turns here. Um, so, Larry, tell us a little bit about a little bit about your upbringing. You know, how horse racing and racing in general, speed racing, became of an interest.
Well, I started off when I was a kid racing go-karts, and I graduated to stock cars and roadsters and dragsters, which I raced at West Hampton every Sunday. And I started that when I was 14 years old, and I used my friend's driver's license when I had to register for the car and myself to race both stock cars at Freeport and the dragsters and roasters. So anyway, I went through that whole thing, and it was I found out real quick that it wasn't just the money I needed to produce these cars, to get these cars going and running, but the money to repair them if you blew an engine or a clutch or whatever. And I start doing whatever I had to do to make that happen. And one day, I'll skip ahead because if I don't, we'll be here until December. Uh, so I'll skip ahead a bunch of years, and then if you want to go back and fill in some of the gaps, we can do that. So I'll skip right ahead, and I was in a gas station one day working on my cars, and a horse van pulled in, and he asked me for a fill up the tank with gas and a bucket of water for the horses. So I start talking with him, and I found out that you could race horses for purse money, and all I did was have a room full of blankets and trophies from winning my races with the stock cars, and because of the lack of funds, I crossed the line many times and got myself in a lot of trouble. And that's the part we're skipping right into the racehorse. So I got into the racehorse business, and along with that, I met a guy who introduced me to sports betting, and I developed a habit. And prior to that, my only habit was girls and racing. And but then I was making a lot of money with this guy, uh, fixing races and losing it all betting on sports. And after a couple of $1 million, I was broke, and I took a shot at him, and I lost about $700,000, 800,000. And at that point, I had to make a decision: either run away, kill myself, or come back and face the music. And I came back, and he wasn't a guy to fool with. He was a bad guy. His name was Kabert. That was his nickname. He's from New Jersey, and he was a bad guy. And he made me an offer that, well, he didn't make me an offer. He put me in bucket of cement and took me out in the ocean and just basically told me, he says, you know, you took a shot at me and my man here let you do that, and that's on him. And what you did is on you. Now you tell me why I shouldn't let this cement harden and throw you the fuck overboard. And my simple answer, and the only answer, was I could pay. You know, the same way I made the money that I lost to you, over $1 million, I could pay this back. And he said, okay, if you could pay it back, he said, I'm gonna make this a Shylock loan. Now, this 700,000-800,000 that I owed to two different guys. One was an old Jewish bookmaker called Barney Cutler. He was in Monticello, and this guy was Gebert. So I owed each of them like 360, 380. And the deal he made with me was, I'm going to make this a Shylock loan, 2 points every week. Every week you come with 7,200. And if you miss one payment, you'll be right back here, and there'll be no turning around. And that's how I got myself in trouble. And I made the same deal with the Barney Cutler, the Meyer Lansky crew guy from the old days, who retired up Monticello, and it was easy for him to make the deal. So I made the deal, and every week I had to come up with close to $16,000 in vig for both of them, and I still owed the close to 700,000. And that started me on a path of fixing races and hundreds and hundreds of races, making millions of dollars, just to pay the vig and to live and so anyway, that's the 0 to 100 in 2 second story of how I got to that point. We skipped from 64 to 71 in 2 minutes that I've been talking. Now we can fill in a lot of the gaps. You can ask me a couple of questions. You can ask me anything you want to ask me about anything, and I will answer them. But that's the
gist.
That's the 0 to 60.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty interesting to say the least. Well, what I do want to get back to, like you said, go back. What interested you in speed, racing, go-karts? Speed? Was there something that you liked when you were very young? What inspired you to get interested in that particular sport?
What I loved it ever since I had a pair of roller skates. I never wanted to lose a race. I was always racing, you know, who can go around the block the fastest on roller skates. And then it progressed to roller skate on a board coming down the hill, and then to little box cars that you made. And then as I got older, maybe 14, 15, you start just a neighborhood thing, because of the neighborhood I grew up in. Jackson Heights was right next to Astoria. They had the Astoria Gents gang, and Corona, they had the Corona Dukes, and I was right in the middle of that, and I knew all of them kids, and you know, you wind up getting involved a little bit, and what really put me on the track to racing was I got really tired of getting my nose broken, getting hit over the head with bats, going to these gang fights, and I had a terrible I could never hit first, and the best way to lose a fight is not to hit first, you know. And I could never hit first. I could only get mad enough to crack a guy if he hit me first, and that was bad. But I was lucky enough to win almost every fight that I had. But one day, sitting in the diner, I'll never forget this. It was on 94th Street and Astoria Boulevard, Jackson Heights. I was sitting in the diner after we had a fight. We went up to a bar called Gill Days, and
which diner was it? Because I know there's the one there, the Buccaneer. I don't know if it's the same one.
I haven't been there back there in 30 years, so I don't know. But there used to be a diner on the two corners, right on
Yeah, it's still there.
Wood Street.
Still
Yeah,
there.
they built there.
Yeah.
Well, I went to the diner on the right hand side, and I was sitting there, and prior to that, every night we'd have a fight. You know, a bunch of us guys get together and just go out looking for trouble, like stupid 15-year-old kids, 16-year-old kids. And so we used to go. This particular night, we went up to Gildays. It was an Irish bar on Queens Boulevard, right around by the 59th Street Bridge. And we robbed the car. We all hopped in the car. We went to Gildays. We all had bats, and we opened the door and say something stupid like "all Irishmen suck," you know. And here they come running out the door, and then we'd hit them with bats, and the ones that kept coming, we'd wind up in a fight with them. And this is an every night thing. So that one night, I we were sitting in the diner, covered with blood and everything. And I said, you know, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. It's so stupid to me. I loved music, I loved girls, and I loved going fast. And I didn't enjoy hitting people. I didn't enjoy fighting. I wanted to listen to music, have girls around me, and racing cars. And I stopped right then. I just stopped. I stopped with the gang stuff. I stopped with everything, and it was very easy to promote from that, because the next step was mob associate, and you know, fancy
Yeah.
cars, hanging out with these guys and doing stupid things. But I that wasn't me. I didn't want to follow anybody. I didn't want to take anybody's lead. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to do was listen to music, race cars, and fool around with girls. And that's what and I stopped that very young. But then I went into the car, doing the cars, and I built my first stock car. I think I was 15 years old, 14, 15, right after that. And getting old junkyard parts, and working in the chicken place after school and everything. And I turned out to be worse and worse and worse. I was just a stupid kid. And I built my first stock car, and I went to the Freeport, and I registered. And back then the licenses weren't plastic; they were cardboard. And I
Mhm.
had to get my friend's license, because I think I was 15 years old at the time. And so I got my friend's license. His name was Robert Algemento, and that's the reason I remember this story, because when I registered, his license was folded in half in his wallet, and he gave it to me. And right across his name was the fold, and you couldn't make out the spelling. So he says, "Your name, Robert Algemento, license." I handed him a license, and he says, "How do you spell Algemento?" And I had no idea, but I just rattle on. He start laughing. He says, "Go ahead." So I went, and then I found out that you know, you blow a clutch, or you blow an engine, and that's what started me on the road of stealing. I started robbing gas stations, getting 30, 40, $50, and that's what started me on that road. So when the guy with the horse van pulled in, and I found out you could raise some money, I immediately switched to horses. And when I switched to horses, I was at I was at I started out at Roosevelt Raceway, and they gave, well, see, it's a long story. I got to get into it. What happened? Let me tell you from the beginning. We got a little time, right? So rather than me jump ahead years, I'll tell you what happened when I was racing the cars and getting in trouble and robbing and stealing and everything, just to get money to support my car habit. I got in a real jackpot one day. I robbed a gas station. I blew an engine on a dragster, and I needed like $300-400. And the most I can get from robbing gas stations was $30-40. So I had to look for a big score. I found a big score. It was a gas station that was just opening, had all brand new tires, brand new transmission jacks, and it was thousands and thousands of dollars worth of all new equipment for the grand opening. So a couple of nights later, I robbed a box truck, and I went there about 2 o'clock in the morning. I broke into the place, and I robbed everything. Well, 3 or 4 months later, somehow the owner whose gas station who I robbed, he found the new transmission jacks. That's how they caught me, because back then in the 60s, the cars were switching a lot from standard shift to automatic transmissions, and you needed these special transmission jacks to get them down. So they found it and they brought me, and 3 months later, I got a knock on the door. It was Detective Sands from 114 precinct. And they took me to the station house. They asked me to sign a confession. I wouldn't sign a confession. He come around the desk. He slapped me in the face. I hit him in the belly, and the windup was they handcuffed me behind the chair. The other two detectives that were there, and Detective Sands went and got a big book, and he started pounding me on the head with it. And my eyes, my ears, everything. My nose was starting to bleed. I basically passed out for a minute or two, and they slapped me around. They uncuffed me. They asked me to sign it, and I wouldn't sign it. The confession again. And they slapped me. I fell to the floor, and they kicked me and jumped on me. And this is what they did back then in the 60s. Today, you have the right to an attorney. None of that stuff back then. If you had long nails, they put a pair of pliers on your nail and just, you ready to sign? No, and they pull a nail out. That's what happened back then in them days. It's not like it was today. You have the right to an attorney, you have the right to remain silent. None of that. They beat the shit out of you. So that's what they did to me. I crawled up in the corner, and they kept jumping on my ankles, and they start hitting me with that pole that they used to push the windows up with. And the bottom line was, I woke up in the tombs downstairs at the bottom of the precinct. They have they have 3 cells down in the basement. They call them the tombs. They have about 6 inches of water on the floor, rats as big as dogs, and that's where they left me from Thursday night until Monday morning when they took me to the courthouse. And my mother and father were there. They got me out, and I told my mother, I said, "Ma, you have to get me to a hospital. I can't breathe." The windup was, I found this out later, I had 3 or 4 broken ribs. I broke a broken ankle. I had a concussion, and I had an eye socket that was messed up, and I was in pretty bad shape. But she says, I'm going to take you where I should have taken you 2 years ago. And that was to her boss. Her boss was Tommy Lucchese, 3 Finger Brown. I don't know if you recognize the name, but he was one of the founding members of La Cosa Nostra, in Manhattan. And back then, in the 50s and 60s, they basically controlled all of Manhattan. And he got me in his office, and he told me, he asked my mother to leave the room, and he talked to me one-on-one, and he said to me, "Your mother is a good woman, and she's my friend, and you're breaking her heart with all your nickel and dime bullshit. And I want you to go home, and I want you to think about what I said. And if you want to straighten your life out, I'll help you in every way I can, including making all the trouble you're in right now go away, and you'll never have a problem." So I went home and I thought about it. There was really nothing to think about. I mean, I knew who he was. I mean, he was invited to my sister's wedding, and I knew who he was. And I never thought about me breaking my mother's heart, because ever since I was a kid, I was always defiant, and the only failure she had in life was trying to straighten me out. So, but I did straighten out. I straightened my life out, and I went and got a job in a gas station, and I wanted to get a job in a gas station because I wanted to keep racing my cars. But I knew the perfect gas station. It was on Northern Boulevard, right? As soon as you come over the Flushing Bridge, there was a gas station when Northern Boulevard began, and it was open 24 hours a day. It was in a pretty bad neighborhood. It was an old black neighborhood at the time. And they were always looking for night help. They didn't want to close at night because there's a lot of traffic going into the city from the story from Northern Boulevard. So I walked in and I said to the guy, I says, I know you're looking for somebody at night. I says, and I'd like to take the job on the one condition. You let me park my cars here and work on them during while I'm working at night. And he said, okay. And he says, but I want to tell you, he says, you have to be careful. He says, you're a young fella. You got to be careful. We get robbed every once in a while. And I said, that was no problem as long as you let me keep my cars there. And the reason it was no problem was because I was the one that was robbing the gas station every once in a while.
I was about to say.
So, yeah, so there was not a problem. And that's the gas station I was in when Mike Foley pulled in with the horse van. And I found out that you could race horses for purse money versus me racing cars for blankets and trophies. And he invited me out to the farm, and I went out to the farm. And after about 7, 8 months, I stayed there. I never went back for my cars or nothing. I fell in love with the horses instantly as soon as I got out there. Because I'm a city kid. I never been around horses. The only horse I saw was when the junk man came down the street with the horse in the wagon collecting junk. So I fell in love with the horses right away, and it was something that was I can't describe it except that you can't fall in love with a fender or a bumper, but you can fall in love with a breathing animal, and I did. And then that the fact that you could race, which is what I wanted to do, and then win money, that was the thing I wanted to do. So I
Well, before you move on, you said you fell in love with the animals, with the horses, per se.
yeah, yes,
Now, I'm just switching gears a little bit here
go ahead.
because the industry, the horse racing industry per se, they have taken a lot of slack for the way horses are treated in that industry.
Right.
For some, I find that only because you say you're the love. I mean, I love animals too. I have a dog. I love animals. Period. And for somebody who loves the animals, what was your perception of how they were treated? What is your opinion on that?
What you're talking about has just come to light in the last 10 years with the animal rights people. I'm talking about 60 years ago.
Oh no, I know, I understand, but I'm
Uh,
saying, was there signs even then?
Absolutely, yeah. There's abuse in anything, and people abuse their pets, people abused horses and everything else. There was nothing much I could do about it, nothing much I could say about it. I just know how I felt and how I treated the horses. And through the years, after I got in a little bit of trouble, which I'll get to, I made sure the horses get fed before myself. But anyway, and I'll get into that. So the short answer is yes, there was abuse and animal cruelty, but it was not on my part. I love the animals, and I found, in fact, I was noted for fixing animals, recognizing lameness problems that were not obvious and fixing them. And I made it my life study. I stayed with the vets after my morning work was done and learned the complete anatomy of a horse. I could tell you the whole anatomy of a horse, how many bones were in the knee, how many were in the hock, and it just became an obsession with me. And whenever I was at a track near a university, I would go into the university and learn more and more. So I was the complete opposite of that. And there were a few times in my life when I saw horses get abused that I went and I asked to buy the horse, even paying more than what the horses were, just to get them out of this guy's hands. And one quick example about that was there was in fact, I'll tell you his name. His name was Sam O'Neill. He was a trainer. He come up with a new horse feed called, I think it was called Quick Whiz or something like that. And he invented it, and he started trying to sell it, and he was selling it. He was feeding all his horses with it, and there was one horse that wouldn't eat it. And so he took all the straw and hay out of the stall, left the horse on dirt, and just all he did was leave this feed in his feed tub, and the horse wouldn't eat it. And that horse was stabled right next to one of my horses. And every day I'd say, Sam, he's not eating, he's not eating. And his answer was, fuck him, he'll die or he'll eat it. And after about 3 weeks, the horse was really starting to get, he was just in the corner with his head down between his legs. And I said, Sam, sell me the horse. And he sold me the horse. And I wound up winning 4 or 5 races in a row with him after I fattened him up and start treating him good. But that's a typical example of how I felt and how some people could be so cruel and use them just as like they were cars, they were machines, you know. So anyway, I get my license, and my mother tells Tommy Lucchese that I straightened out my life. I got my license, and my mother called me one day. I was at the farm, and she says to me, come home, I have something for you. Tommy gave me something for you, and he gave me $20,000. And he said, good luck, and if you need more, just let me know. That was the message that he gave my mother to give to me. I bought 4 horses with the money, with all the equipment I needed, and I applied for stalls at Roosevelt Raceway. And I got denied. And when I got denied, I asked Mike Foley, who was my mentor at the time teaching me, I says, they denied me stalls, Mike. And he says, well, that's because you're new. They don't know who you are. It's a premier racetrack. And then, you know, you have to just make the rounds at all the smaller racetracks. And I didn't know that, but
Was it there at Aqueduct?
no, this was Aqueduct's the flats. This was the Trotters. So
Okay.
it was Roosevelt and Yonkers, Aqueduct and Belmont's the flats with the jockeys. This was the Trotters with the drivers and the bike.
Okay.
So I told my mother, and my mother called up her boss because I was worried because he gave me 20,000. You know, I want to do the right thing. So anyway, my mother calls me the next day and she says, Tommy says, go ship your horses to Roosevelt. There'll be 4 stalls waiting for you. So I said, how did he do that? And how he did it was because the owner of the racetrack was Morton Levy. Morton Levy was the attorney for Lucky Luciano and him. He was an attorney for all the mob guys. So he made one phone call to the guy who owned the racetrack, and I got whatever I wanted. And they let me drive there, and the first year was an unbelievable year. I think I won 7 out of my first 8 races. And I got a big write-up in the newspaper, and a full-page write-up. And they interviewed all the other drivers there, the this is the top of the line guys. And they all gave me great reviews. And the phone started ringing. I was getting a lot of publicity, and a lot of owners wanted to buy horses for me. And I was really on a road. And the meet ended, and I went to Yonkers. And when I was in Yonkers, I had a horse that was in. I won't tell you the whole story about that, but I was in a race, and the owner of the racetrack, Marty Tannenbaum, accused me of doing something. He accused me of stiffing the horse, and I really didn't. It was a legitimate race. I just got locked in. He accused me of stiffing the horse, and he ordered me off the racetrack. Now, once he ordered me off the racetrack, because it was a major racetrack, reciprocity sets in, and no other tracks will take you except the very small racetracks. So for the next 3 or 4 years, I went to the smallest racetracks in the country, starving to death. And if it wasn't for pigeons and bran mashes, I'd starve to death. But I always made sure my horses got fed. I would create midnight, get up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, go steal horse feed from other trainers at the track. And it was things I had to do to keep my horses alive. And then one day, Lincoln Downs in 1971, Lincoln Downs opened for the first time ever. They had standardbred racing. And I applied for stalls and I got them. And they had bigger purse money than all the little tracks I was at. And when I was at Lincoln Downs, opening day, I had 2 horses in, both morning line favorites. And down the shed row comes 3 guys, 3 big guys, each of them over 300 pounds. And the guy in the middle reaches me and he says, "You Larry Rolla?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "I'm Tony Schuler. I'm with the Hole in the Wall gang, the Whitey Bulger, the Winter Hill gang. I'm with Whitey Bulger, and we control all these racetracks." And I said, "Good for you." And I said, "What can I do for you?" And he says, "Well, you have 2 morning life favorites, and if you're interested, I'll give you $200 a horse. Just be worse than third. Tell me what stall they're in. My vet will come and take care of them." And in other words, give them a tranquilizer, a drug, or something. Where, so I said, "Listen, and you got to remember that I grew up all around these wise. I grew up around all that bullshit, and." And even though I was broke and hungry and everything, I mean, I wanted to kiss the guy right on the lips when he said, "You want to make money?" Because I didn't have no money. So I said, "Listen," I says, "I got 2 morning line favorites. I know what you're doing. You're gonna bet the race. You're gonna box trifectas or whatever. You want me out of it. I want 500 a horse. I want the cash right now." And he looks at me and he starts laughing to the other 2 guys. He says, "You know who the fuck you're talking to?" I says, "It really don't make a difference." I says, "That's a deal. You want a deal? You want me out of the trifectas? It's going to cost you 500 a horse. You're going to make a whole lot more money doing that. I know what you're doing." And he counts out $1,000. And he says, he counting. He says, "I sure you know what the fuck you're doing, because I'll be back in the morning." And I says, "That's great. Just bring coffee and a bagel, no sugar." And sure enough, the next morning he came back, and I finished fourth with both horses. I had 1,000 in my pocket, and he was happy as hell. He made a lot of money. And he told me that he asked me if I could get other drivers to get along. Now, I knew nobody up there. But when you're at these racetracks, everybody's broke. The smaller racetracks, everybody's broke and starving. So within a week, I had 5 or 6 other guys that were willing to do what I did, and we made a tremendous amount of money. And it was like a 3-month meet, a 3-month race meet. So by the second meet, by the second week, month, I had $30,000-$40,000 more money than I ever had in my life. And he says to me one day, he says, "Listen," he says, "by the way," he says, I got a little edge on hoops tonight. You want to bet?" And what am I going to say? I mean, he says he has an edge, and we've been making a lot of money. I says, "Do whatever you do for you, do for me." He says, "I'm betting 2,000 on the game." I said, "All right, bet." I had no idea what hoops was. I had no idea about nothing. Anyway, the next day he comes back. He hands me $4,000 or $5,000, and he had an. I guess he was fixing the college games or whatever. And that bet, because from the remainder of the meet, he got me involved, and every time so naturally, is another way of making money. And I started my gambling habit then, and it turned into a serious problem, where by the time the meet ended, I had developed a very bad betting habit. It was bad, and I was making a lot of money with the horses and losing a lot of money. Now we'll skip ahead a little bit, because in there is where I'm racing, fixing races, but every penny I'm making, I'm losing. So when I ran out of money, which was about $1 million later, to the 2 guys, Barney Cutler and Cabert, I had excellent credit, because every Tuesday, if I lost 70, 80,000, I would pay him. I got up to the point where I was betting 20,000 a game with each of them, and I bet in 10, 11 games every weekend. It was the football season back then. I'm talking about that.
So this is around what, the 70s?
Yeah, it was in 72, 70. I think it was the first year they had the Super Bowl, because I remember I was stuck so much money when the Super Bowl came up. I just bet, I think I bet 50,000 with each of them on the Super Bowl.
Wow.
And lost. So anyway, now I'm broke. I took a shot to get even on the Super Bowl, and I lost everything. So now it's sometime in February, and I was broke, but I had a habit. I had a bet, and so I made up an excuse. I says, listen, I'm going to Florida to buy a piece of property, and I'll be gone for a couple of weeks, knowing he would say, no problem. He says, just call me for the line. I'll give you the line. Knowing he would say that because my credit was excellent. I mean, he got $1 million from me, and I paid every Tuesday. So sure enough, I went to Florida, and this was just taking a shot. Had no money, hoping I would get even, and satisfy my habit, because I got to the point where I had a bet. And the first week I lose 50, 60,000, whatever. By the end of the third week, I lost the $700,000, $800,000. And that's when, like I said before, I had to make a choice to kill myself, run away, or come back. And I came back, and that's when he made the money I owed him, a Shylock loan for 2 points. So I had to come up with $7,200 a week for him, and $7,200 a week for Barney Cutler, because I made the same deal with him. And that started me on a spree of getting very creative, fixing races. And what happened was, they closed all the racetracks for about a month during the winter holidays, a couple of weeks before Christmas, a couple of weeks after New Year's. And I convinced the owner of Monticello Raceway, who turned out to be my good friend, we became very good friends, to stay open for them for that period of time, because he also owned the racetrack. He also owned the Nevele Hotel in I think it was Ellen. No, not Ellenville. I forgot. But anyway, because all the commissioners, the racing commissioners, and everybody stayed at his hotel. So he got that job done, and the handle went from from 200,000 a night to millions every night. And I was able to fix races during that time. But who showed up then was Tony Schuler, the guy that from Boston, Whitey Bulger's guy. So we became. I didn't want him there because I didn't need him anymore, but I couldn't chase him because he was the guy that got me going. So we made a lot of money. And I was able to make my VIG payments every week. And then the meet was coming to an end. The 4 weeks was up, and the handle was going to go back down to nothing. And but during that time, I made a big connection with Connor Rico. He was a jockey at Aqueduct and Belmont, an old timer, but he was still riding. But he knew all the top jockeys there, and I'm talking about all the top guys, Baeza and Yukaza and not Yukaza, Cordero, and all of them guys. So I made a deal with him. I told him, I says, listen, I need to get the morning line favorites and second choices out of the races, because so I'd be left with 4 horses, and I could box them 4 and exactas or trifectas, whatever race it was. And tell them for morning line favorites, I give them 5,000 for the first and second choice, and for the third and fourth choice, I give them 2,500. And we made millions of dollars. But Tony, he was supposed to call me every week, every day. And after about 3 or 4 weeks, he started calling me every other day, and then every third day. And then I got myself in a whole bunch of trouble because he wasn't calling, and I was having trouble making the VIG payments. And then I started getting involved because I couldn't go chasing him, because I had a stable of horses at Monticello. I couldn't go chasing them. I went looking for them at the hotel I put them in, but they weren't there no more. And he was doing his own thing, making a lot of money. And I wind up getting involved in buying counterfeit money from the Scarpo, the Philadelphia crew. There was a guy called Nick Calamandi or something like that. That was
Armando.
What was it?
Nicky Caramandi, Nicky the Crow.
Yeah. That's him. He was doing counterfeit money way back in them years, in the early 70s.
Mhm.
A friend of mine, Charlie, come to me and he says that he said, listen, he knew I was jammed up, and he was one of my runners. Um, and he said, listen, I can get this counterfeit money. It's really good. It's 10 cents on the dollar. So I give him 10,000. He come back with $100,000 worth of counterfeit money. And in one way, it was the best thing that I ever did, even though he wound up going to jail because he tried to buy a car with the counterfeit money, and they caught him and they locked him up. He winds up going to jail, and I go to visit him one day. He was in jail in Indiana, I think. And so one day when I go to visit him, he says, I want you to meet a friend of mine. I told him all about the problem. He thinks he can help you out. And
So the problem you had now was just paying these guys back.
the problem I had was 16,000 a week in VIG. That was my
Right. Yeah, that was the problem, right.
I had to do anything I had. Now, just keep in mind, I'm skipping right along because I know we got about 40 minutes, and if I tell you every detail, and there's a lot I left out, how I
Of
got to
course.
certain points, but we'll be here, like I said, till December. So I'm scooting right along. So he hooks me. So when I go to visit him, he said, there's a guy here, he knows all about your problem, and he thinks he can help you. He introduced me to a guy called Frank Collada. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but okay, you heard of him.
Chicago.
Now, Frank Collada, for your viewers that don't know, Frank Collada,
Hole in the wall gang.
Hole in the Wall gang, right? The Hole in the Wall gang in Vegas when he went out there with Tony Spilotro, okay?
Right.
So I tell him, and I tell him the whole problem, and he says, "Can you hang on?" And this time Schuler wasn't calling me, and I had to make the one payment with Kabert, because he killed 17 guys. He was just a bad guy. He was Gotti's guy in New Jersey, Gotti's button guy. He was just a nasty guy. And the only reason he didn't kill me was because I already got almost $1 million of my money. And the money that I owed him, the 380,000, whatever it wasn't that he lent me the money. It was I lost a bet. And then and he knew I could pay. So I really wasn't that worried about it. I didn't think he would kill me. The only concern why I even thought about dying was because he was nuts. He was just that kind of guy. And so, like I said, I'm skipping by a lot of stuff. So anyway, when Schuler stopped calling, I got myself in a lot of trouble, and I had a 3-state kite going with the checks, and like I said, I'm leaving a lot out. So anyway, I was kiting to make the payments, which I did with my kite checking scam for 3. And back then you had 10 days to make a check good, and I won't get into all of that. So anyway, I was in jeopardy of not making the payments. So Frank Collada says to me, "Can you hang on for another month or two? I'll be getting out." And he says, "I think I can help you." So I says, "I have no choice but to hang on." So I did whatever I could to make my payments, and I did. And sure enough, he gets out. He gave me his mother's phone number where he's going to go. I called up, and when he was out, and he says, "All right, come to see me." So I go to see him, and he says, "Listen, I'm on paper. I'm on parole. I can't fly out." He says, "But Tony won't see you, and I can't help you without Tony. So I'm going to take the chance. We're going to fly to California. We're going to fly to Vegas, and we're going to see Tony." So that's what we do. So I go out there and I meet with Spilotro. And for you people that don't know, if they saw the movie Casino, it was written about him. Pesci played Spilatro's part, a raving lunatic, and I think Frankie Vincent played Frankie Collada's part. I'm not sure, but anyway, I tell him the whole story, and it was good because right at that same year, I think it was the Stardust that started opening up a sports book. Right around that year, 74, I think. And plus he had bookmakers that were under his control, and the rest of them he chased out of town. So he had plenty of bookmakers he could bet with, plus the casino. So I told him, I says, if Frank, if you could send me a couple of guys to go chasing this guy, and you find him, I gave him $1 million opportunity. He's and this, from this point on, everything I'm going to say now was already in the newspapers, because Fat Tony wound up getting caught a couple of years later. And we found him, and they sent what the hell's his name? I forgot his name. Big Jewish guy that was with Shula down there, with Spilatro down there.
Oh, Rosenthal?
Bernstein.
No, what's his name?
Bernstein.
No, what the hell's his name? I forgot. It'll come to me. And he was a big, gigantic guy. He sent him and two other guys. Blitzstein. Blitzstein.
Oh, Harry Blitzstein.
Yeah. You know him too? Oh, you know a lot of this stuff.
I know all this shit.
Oh, I didn't know. I would be more specific, but because I'm just running through it. But if you ask me questions, I'll come up with names that you probably know. So anyway, so he sends this Blitzstein down. He's a big giant guy, and he sends two other guys with him. And I told him, look, I says they're doing races right now at Aqueduct and Belmont, and that's where the jockeys are, and that's where Conorico goes. So they got to be in a hotel around there. So sure enough, we go to a couple of hotels, and we find them. And he just busts in the room and puts a gun almost through the roof of Shula's mouth, and he just says, "Look, you're doing the wrong thing. If you don't want your head blown off, you'll call. And to make sure that you call, we're going to be staying with you for the next couple of months. And so you better do the right thing." And he did, and made a lot of money, caught up on everything, and everything was good again. And then after a couple of months, they had to go back to Vegas, and they went back, and Spilatro was happy as hell, because we were calling him every day with 2 or 3 races. They made a lot of money, millions. In fact, Frank Collada, how I wrote my book, I'll get into a little bit more detail now that you know these guys. Frank Collada called me up sometime in the 90s, and he says, "Listen, I'm writing a book, writing another book." He wrote a couple of books.
Two. Yeah, he wrote 2 of them.
Is it okay if I use that thing that we did, that I did for you? Is it all right if I put it in the book? And I says, "Sure, do whatever you want. I don't care." And he did, and he wrote the book, whatever book it was. He sent me the book. I have it someplace. I never even read it. Something about the mob casino or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, wait a second. I got it right here.
I know which one it is. I have it all.
That's it. Yeah. It's The Rise and Fall of a Casino Monster. Now, that's the book he sent me. I never opened it, and I never read it, but I guess the thing is, in one of his books, my story is in. And he says to me, I met him at a wedding 2 years later.
Yeah, that's probably where I heard your name, because before Frank died, he sent me a copy of it, and I think he mentioned you when he sent me the book, because he said, "I have the same one," and he signed it.
We wind up being very good friends, and if you probably knew that he built a bus to do on his tour. Did you ever see the bus that he built? It was a beautiful bus, and part of the bus was going to be his office, where he's going to have the interview, his room, and I was going to be his first guest, and talk about that incident. But that never came about, because he wound up dying soon after that. And he knew he was dying. You said the last bunch of episodes with Collada with coffee, you had the oxygen and there. It was a terrible, terrible thing. But he was a brave guy. I mean, he was something. And I'll tell you, when he turned against Spilatro and everybody, it bothered him for 10, 12 years. He hated himself. and he didn't want to do that. But Spilotro put him in a bad spot. Spilotro was when Chicago called up and said, "What the hell's going on down there? It's like a free for all." Spilotro blamed it on him, and then the FBI come with a wiretap and showed Frank Collada that Spilotro told the mob, the Chicago guys, that it was all the other guy. I can't control him, and they told him, "Well, take care of your business, take care of your dirty laundry," and that meant kill Collada. That's why he turned. So anyway, they find him, and Spilatro's now made a lot of money. He's very happy and everything, and anything I can do for you. And it was all like that. So it was all good. Everybody made a lot of money. Everybody was happy. And when I saw him at the wedding, he says, you know, of everything I get asked on my tour and about everything, they all ask about that thing with you, about the gambling and everything else. He says, you should write your own book, because he knew my whole story. And that's what prompted me to write the book. And he said, if you write it, I'll get it to Pileggi and all that, because he become very friendly with Pileggi, because Frank was the advisor for the movie Casino that Pileggi wrote and was there every day, and they become very, very friendly. A lot of the people like Pesci, they didn't want to go near Frank because they were afraid that somebody was going to kill him or something. And it was just stupid. But anyway, my friend Alfred Natoli, who's Pesci's double, he became very friendly with him, and we all became very friendly. We talked almost every day on the phone, and he was just a good guy. So anyway, now they go back to Vegas, and I'm on my own again. And Tony, after a week or two, he started pulling the same shit. And I wasn't going to call him again, and I got myself in a place where it was worse than before, where it was really getting bad, because he stopped calling. I think they moved up to Saratoga, and then on the way up to Detroit at Hazel Park, and that's where he eventually got caught. And I was a dead man at that time, because without his phone calls, Monticello went back to a $200,000 handle, and without his phone calls, with him being gone, and I had no idea where Connor Erico was. I found out that they arrested him after Tony Schuler became a rat, and so Con, now he's in jail. So I'm a dead man. I can't earn enough fixing races at Monticello with a small handle to make my $16,000 a week payment. So I didn't know what I was going to do, and I'm going to leave a little.
Before you go any further, because I don't want you to give the whole story away, you know, because I'm sure at this point, if anybody's listening, when they do listen, they do watch the show, they're going to want to know, they're going to want to get your book at this point. Because you're giving us more than, we don't want to, I mean, I want to read the book at this point.
I'm more interested in promoting my podcast, because because of the writer's strike, the TV series, everything is on hold. The only thing I got going now, and it looks like the strike's going to last a long time. So the only thing I got going now is my podcast. And I told my friend who's sitting right next to me now, who does all the editing and the filming and everything, if we're going to do this, let's do it. Let's go all out. I'll start going on other shows. I'll start promoting this thing. So that's what I want to do. Because if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I want to promote so maybe somewhere on your show in the description or whatever, promote my podcast. And it's simple. It's YouTube. Go to YouTube at Larry Rolla, and that's it. And they'll get my podcast. And that's what I want to promote now. And so I'm grateful for being on your show and anybody else's show that'll have me. But and I will also promote your show, because you
oh yeah, of course. I mean, so it's the Larry Rolla, is the Larry Rolla show?
No, go to YouTube at Larry Rolla.
Okay. No, I mean,
at Larry Rolla. That's all, and then they'll get the podcast. and tell them to make sure, and tell them, point your finger with that hat and the sunglasses on, say, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and share, and hit the bell, whatever the hell that means. But that's what you got. That's what you got to do. So if you would do that for me, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, not a big deal.
Okay.
I do want to also mention that your book is called Against All Odds.
My book is called Against Olan. The only place you can get it, because when I wrote the book, I was asked to write the book,
Mhm.
and we're going to send it right to California, which they did, and within a week they sent for me, Village Roadshow and Sony Pictures, and we made a contract. This was in 2019 August, and we made a contract up, and there was going to be we made two contracts up because Pileggi, who I met with a bunch of times, wanted it to be a TV series. He says there's too much material. Because what I just said to you in this half hour that we've been talking is 1/10 of 1% of the story. Because
I can imagine. Yeah, I'm sure.
So there's a lot more, and I didn't know that you were familiar with some of these names because I could have mentioned a lot of them along the way. But that's so that they were going to make it a movie, and I wanted them to make it a movie rather than a TV series because the contracts we had written up were for a budget of $100 million movie, and based on the contract, I was getting 2% of that right up front, which is $2 million, which is what at my age, that's what I wanted. But they're telling me, oh, TV series, you'll make a lot more money. And I says, I'm 83 years old. How much more? I already expected past my life expectancy 5 years ago. I mean, just give me the two. But they wanted to do a TV series. So what happened was we got together with Pileggi and Richard Price and Ed Burns, the actor, and they were going to be the three writers. And then we all met at Peter Luger's. The Sony people and Village Roadshow people flew up here with their whole crew, and they rented they got reserved a table at Peter Luger's, and for 10, there was 10 of us, and I should have sent you the picture. You could have put it up, and we all got introduced to one another, and we were on our way. So we were going to go down there in December. And we waited till after the holidays. We flew down to California in middle of January, February, and COVID hit where everybody was dying. Everybody, you couldn't, and they shut California right down. So everybody ran home. They were scared of dying, and everybody was dying, not only in the whole world. So they bought the rights to it. They paid me a lot of money for the rights, but it was for 16 months. So they shut down for 2 years. So after the second year, they called me up and they said, look, our option on your story ran out. We'd like you to re-sign. And I says, I'd be glad to re-sign if you could tell me that we'd start right up where we left off. And they said they couldn't promise that because they shut down a lot of things that they were in the middle of with major stars, and they had to finish them up first. And I says, well, I'm not going to sign. I'll take my chances someplace else. And they said, okay. They says, but if you get somebody that will write the script and everything else, we'll partner up with them. We're willing to put up 50 million. So right after that, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Green Book, but
No,
okay, Green Book was written about that piano player and one of my good friends, Tony Lip.
I knew Tony Lip.
Okay. So he was my good friends, and I met him years ago at the Copa. He was a maitre d' at the Copa with Carmine. Now I'm sure you know them names. So I met him, and at the time I was fixing races, and Tony loved the racetrack. He loved the horses, and I meet him at all different racetracks, and I'd help him out, give him tips and everything else. So anyway, they're his sons, Nick and Frank. They wrote the movie, Green Book.
I know.
And they won the Academy Award and everything else. So Frank calls me up one day and he says, I don't see your movie around. And I says, well, I told him what happened. I says, I refused to sign another agreement. And he says, well, we want to do it. So him and his brother fly to Jersey, and we start looking for locations and everything, and who's going to play who, and we wrote a screenplay, which I have because they just wanted to do a movie, and we did like 400 voiceovers because even Pileggi said that Casino had 350 voiceovers because, and it was still a long movie, but voiceovers you can do like a whole bunch of scenes that would take 40 pages of script in just 30 seconds of a voiceover. So we wrote the script with almost 400 voiceovers, and we were all ready to do it. And he called me up one day, Frank, and he says to me, "My brother has got to run back to California for 2 weeks. Instead of me staying in this room all by myself, because they had a room in Paramus, a hotel room, can I stay with you?" And because when he first got here, he got here 2 weeks before his brother Nick, and I picked him up at the airport, and he stayed with me for the 2 weeks, and we become very, very close, and everything was fine. So I said, "Of course you could stay with me." So he says, "All right, I'll be there tomorrow night." So the next night came, Monday night, he never showed up. So I called him Tuesday, no answer, Wednesday, no answer, Thursday, and you probably know this too. Thursday, I get a phone call. They found him dead in the street in a box. Picked up a hooker, got a bunch of cocaine laced with fentanyl. They found him dead. So at the wake and at the repast, all the movie stars were there. Everybody was there. And his brother Nick come over to me. He says, "Here's my personal cell number." He says, "I need to get back home. I need a lot of straightening out to do. I need time." This is because that was his only brother. He says that, and they were dependent on one another their whole lives. So I said, "I understand, no problem." And I was never going to call him. I was going to wait for him to call me. And I knew he had a lot on his plate because before he flew out, he met with Pavarotti's daughter, and he got the rights to do Pavarotti's life story. And at the same time, he was meeting with I can't think of his name, and he's my friend, and I still can't think of his name. That's I'm 84 years old now. I blank out. I just
Okay. So
but they wrote the story about Carlo Gambino, and so he had and Fran Pesci wrote a screenplay he wanted him to do. So he had a lot on his plate. So a week after he left, I get a phone call from Barry O'Brien. Barry O'Brien's the writer for Law and Order, and he'd been doing TV series for 40 years. He started with Ally McBeal, if you remember that show way back, and he did about maybe 10 or 15 TV series since then. He knows everybody in the business, and they shoot in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. So he asked me to come down, and he wanted to meet with me, and I went down there. We had a long conversation, and he says, "Okay." He says, "My writing for the TV series ends in the middle of April." He says, "So figure May 1st or 2nd, we'll fly to California. We'll start writing scripts. We'll write a pitch, and I'll go to all my friends at Netflix and all the streaming services to do a TV series." And I said, "Okay." So May 1st comes, and I'm making arrangements to fly to California. And May 2nd, the writer's strike happened, and that put the whole thing on hold. So the only thing I had going was the podcast. And originally we started the podcast in the beginning with Frankie Vincent. But then when Village Roadshow and Sony, we did it right away. We signed the contracts and everything. So there's no reason for the podcast. But then when that happened, I started the podcast, and then I stopped it again. And then I started it again because it was going to just be maybe 1 hour podcast that led into the TV series. Mm-hmm. But then when the TV series, when the writer's strike happened, we just did the TV series. So as long as the writer's strike is on, I'm going to continue doing TV series. And it looks like it's going to go on for a while. So I need to promote the TV series, and that means getting on shows like yours and getting, and just helping one another out to get the word out there. So that's what that's what we're doing. And now I forgot where I was before I went into this rant, but
No, it's okay. It's fine because we kind of went over the time to begin with.
so you oh, we did.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. So
No, it's
whenever
all good.
you
Well,
ask me anything you want to ask me, and say goodbye whenever you're ready, and then whatever.
well, I know there's so much more you can tell us, and maybe we'll just have you on the show another time to fill in the rest of the spots, rest of the holes that are still unfilled. But
There's 20 years worth of gaps.
I know, right? For sure. But I do want to definitely tell the audience, whoever people are going to be, because this is pre-recorded, and then people are going to be checking it out when we put it up. That to definitely check Larry Rolla's podcast on YouTube. I'm sure it's probably very, very, very interesting, no doubt. I mean, I had a great time speaking to you and listening to all the stories, even though half the names of everybody you mentioned I knew already. But that's just me, because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to know these people.
Sometime in an email me where you got that hat and glasses.
I will. I'll let you know. But
Look, anything I could do to help you, I will. Just I think you have my phone number now. Call me anytime, whatever you want to do. Anything. I don't care what it is. I just won't kill nobody. But other than that, anything that you could ask me, I'll do. I'll help you in any way that you could, and it'd be nice if you did the same.
oh, sure. That's what I'm all about. Reciprocation. That's what it's
By the
all
way,
about.
you have a good friend that hooked us up. What's his name? Anthony?
Oh, Frank.
Frank. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's right. Frank Licasio.
Casio.
When he first contacted me, I said, Frank Licasio's dead. He was my friend too. From
Yeah, from the John Gotti's crew.
Gotti's crew. Yeah.
Yes, I know who he is.
And I says, Frank Licasio. So I responded to him and I wanted to talk to him. And because you a fraud, but his name is Frank Licasio. And the first thing I says, are you ever in Monticello? And he said, yes. And I says to myself, this guy's full of shit. But I'm going to get to the bottom of it because Frank Licasio bought a farm up near
Yeah.
and he has a son that's up there. But his name,
Right.
but it turned out to be your guy. And he says that you're a good friend of mine, that you're a good friend of his, and that you're a
Right.
good guy. And you are a good guy. You're a nice guy.
That's
And
right.
clean shaven and everything.
That's right.
How do you get the beard out of that thing and cleffing your chin?
No, I don't know. It works.
It works. All right, look, if you want to end this thing, because I don't want you to go overtime, whatever. I don't know how you work it, but anything I can do to help you anytime, I will. Just call me up.
Okay, I appreciate it. Well, look, Frank, I really appreciate you coming on the show. It was very enlightening information, very interesting. And maybe we'll have you on the show again if we to fill up any, like I said, spots that we haven't covered yet. And I'm sure I'm gonna have more questions. But I definitely want to say thanks a lot, Larry, for you coming on the show, and I wish you a lot of luck with your show as well. And we'll definitely talk about it, promote it as well. That's where we both help each other out.
Where do you live?
I'm in New York.
Okay. All right.
I'm
Okay.
originally from Rockaway Park.
Okay, I got a story about Rockaway Park. But
I'm sure you
go
do.
into it next time. All right. Nice meeting you, Nick, and good luck to you.
You too, Larry. Thank you very much.
See ya.